Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. This week we've got another very difficult passage from Luke. Is Luke 21 verses 5 to 19, and in the beginning of this passage Luke is talking about the temple and how people shouldn't be allying their faith with the strength of the building and the beauty of the building in the temple. And I wanted to spend some time thinking about that with the rural challenge for today. People tend to, in villages, really associate their faith with the building. And some people will only go and worship in the one building. And you can see why it happens for people. You can see that people are very tied to the communion of saints in that place. They remember the people that they have worshipped alongside, and for some people in villages it is a generational thing. It's where their parents worshipped, it's where their grandparents worshipped, it's where their family faith, their household faith is very much anchored. However, it's really important for us to stretch people and to challenge people and say, well, actually the faith that you have here, you could express that faith in another place, in a different church building. Sometimes you find people reluctant to go to church even in a different church building that's 3 miles down the road. How do we encourage people to not be so tied up with the stones of their own church buildings, own church building in particular, but actually how to not rely on that so much as part of the expression of their faith. We want to encourage people and to celebrate the communion of saints in a place, but actually how can we also encourage people to be living out their faith in different places in the community, away from the stones of the church building. Thought for the week this week is based on Luke chapter 21 verses 5 to 19, and it's not a cheery passage of scripture. It's another challenging passage from Luke for us. It starts off with Jesus talking about the temple. People have been admiring the beauty and the strength of the temple, and Jesus talks about the fact that the temple will be taken down, will be broken and pulled to pieces. And then Jesus talks about how lives are going to become unstable, how there's going to be wars, how there's going to be famines, how there's going to be plagues, how there's going to be persecution, how there's going to be all these sorts of things for people to withstand. He talks about how families are going to betray each other, how difficult that's going to be for people. But he also talks about, in those situations, that we need to rely on what God is going to give us to say. And then he says those who endure will gain their soul. Those who endure these things will gain their soul. So it's quite a complicated passage. I've been preparing for it this week, and I've really been thinking about how it's kind of the opposite of the prosperity gospel that Jesus is talking about. Jesus is saying, no, this is going to be tough. This is going to be tough. This is not a walk in the park. This is a difficult and long endurance race for you people. It's not going to bring you simple or uncomplicated or safe lives. It is going to be complicated. And then Jesus says those who endure will gain their soul. Now, I think it's interesting to think about this, and next week we're going to hear a bit about Jesus turning to the person on the cross next to him and saying, today you'll be with me in paradise. So I'm not saying that actually when Jesus says when you endure you will gain your soul, I'm not sure that that's as tightly tied into salvation as some people think, because obviously the man on the cross had no time for amendment of life. But it is a helpful way of us thinking about how we are refined as people, how we are refined as Christians by the things that we endure, by the difficulties that we face. And you know, before I've said how I was really touched earlier in the year by somebody actually being bold enough to say, actually the prosperity gospel is heresy. And here we have Jesus saying just that this is not going to be an easy time. Don't associate your faith with buildings or places, because there are going to be many difficult things to endure. Instead, associate your faith with the knowledge that God is right there with you, will be able to give you the words that you need to say, and that through this endurance that you retain that closeness with God. So a difficult passage for us to think about today, but basically saying actually don't put your faith in buildings or things which are humanly made. Instead, rely on God. The Dibley moment of the week this week is something which happened to me very recently, and it's about church building, and it's about something which I was pleased happened in one way and not in another. I was leading a very large, well-attended service where a really good proportion of the village was at standing room only. It was due to start at 10:15, and at 10:13 there was a large crash, and I wandered around to the site of this. I was around the corner, so I couldn't see what was happening, thinking, please don't let this be someone who has fallen and we need to call an ambulance for. But no, it was not that. We were blessed that it was not that. Instead, a large piece of pew had just decided at the moment that was when it was going to fall and bang against another bit of pew. So our church building had failed us just at that moment, when we needed calm and peace, and the building to hang on together. But no, we should not be trusting in our buildings, because sometimes the buildings just fall apart. Well, that's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where you are able to endure the hard times and gain your soul.